you have revamped
Right.
the program, and it's now got these 2 modules. It had been 2 different programs. So I'll let you take it from here.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And it's nice to know that we've got current clients here. Some of you, again, as Lisa said, I probably worked with at some point. And so what we're talking about today is Health Contact Center Accreditation. And this accreditation was launched in February of this year. And so because we've got organizations that may have a knowledge of these programs, I'm going to go ahead and just mention the fact that the programs that were combined to create the Health Contact Center version 6.0 accreditation are the former Health Call Center version 5.1 accreditation and the Contact Center version 1.0 certification. So as you can see here, there are 2 modules, clinical and non-clinical. So a modular approach was introduced in this revision. And the purpose of that was to provide the opportunity for an organization to seek accreditation in either one or both of the clinical program and or non-clinical program accreditations. Organizations providing clinical triage activities might be interested in the clinical module, and organizations providing non-clinical or administrative services that support the healthcare industry. So that's an important aspect of this, can apply for the non-clinical module. So next slide. Oh, and I should have mentioned there, if an organization would apply for one or both, if they apply for one, they can add a second module at any time. So thanks for going back to that, Lisa. I didn't want to forget to add that. Okay, so what you see here are the foundational focus areas. And since those of you that are attending today are current clients and are familiar with our foundational focus areas, just a mention that what you see here listed on the left are the foundational focus areas that apply to both the clinical contact center and the non-clinical contact center modules. So you see there risk management, operations and infrastructure, the performance monitoring and improvement. So think quality there, consumer protection and empowerment. There are measures with this revision, so there would be mandatory and exploratory measures. And I'll just also mention here that measure specifications are updated and made available in the 4th quarter of each year, and that exploratory performance measures are not required for annual reporting. And you can find a copy of the measures at a glance and the reporting instructions templates in AccreditNet, or if you can't find those, you can always talk to your client relations manager. So next slide.
And Diane, just to mention, because I know someone is in pharmacy here, this differs a little bit in that the measures reporting for this program does not require independent data validation.
Yes, good point, Jeff. Thanks for that. Okay, thank you so much. So we are looking at the program focus areas now for the non-clinical modules. So
And Diane, real quick before you get into this, clinical module participants should also look at this because the clinical module also covers all of these. So don't tune out quite yet, and it's a great time to ask us questions.
Yes. So each module doesn't include, so that Lisa has a good point, it's clinical and non-clinical. Each module includes the program management, the staff qualifications and requirements, the individual consumer information, the communication process and monitoring, the performance monitoring for communication modalities, the program satisfaction, performance, and reporting. And I want to just stop and mention here as well, because you see down the right, I'm not going to read all those to you, but you see down the right, what you might be thinking about. So just for example, performance monitoring at the bottom, how you track what you're doing and that you have oversight by a quality management body. But since we've got experts that are attending today, you're familiar with what we may be looking for in some of these areas. And I also just want to make a quick mention here that some standards and elements of performance may not be applicable to an applicant organization. We hear that frequently, just be aware that mandatory standards cannot be designated as not applicable. And if the element of performance is weighted, the applicant would submit an attestation on organizational letterhead signed by the appropriate leader to say that this is not applicable for the application because of the type of business that you have. Leading indicators are another thing, but you're all familiar with that. And I just wanted to point out the importance of the accreditation guide. So as you're looking at all of these areas and you're thinking about the program areas, you may come across something that you're not sure about. Go back to the front matter of the accreditation guide. There is a lot of great information there. Organizations sometimes skip right to the standards because there's good stuff there. You know, you've got your standards, you've got your interpretive information, what is required on desktop, what's required on validation review. But please, because we're talking about a new program here that is a combination of two prior, an accreditation and a certification, it's going to be important for you to take a look back at that front matter because there's a lot of information in there for you. So next slide, Lisa. So we talked about, you know, the focus areas for the non-clinical module, but again, what we're looking at on this slide is remember those focus areas that you just saw. All of those apply also for the clinical module, plus these additional. So if you think about this, you know, we're talking about a clinical process, possibly triage, whether that's pharmacy or whether that is medical, you know, or healthcare, based on the other side as you would think about that. So in the communication process and monitoring, we're going to be looking at the analysis of outcomes. If you're doing clinical triage, we're going to be taking a look at communicating with clinicians if there's a need for continuing care and treatment. And then in the performance monitoring, who responds to clinical inquiries? So those are important aspects that are incorporated in the standards. And one other thing that I want to mention here, because I know that it will be a question, is typically when we have a new program, a revised program that's introduced, and in particular, because we've got you know, this coming from Health Call Center and also from Contact Center Certification, a question that we always get is if I'm already accredited under Health Call Center version 5.1 or Contact Center Certification, I believe that was 1.0. When do I need to comply with the version Health Contact Center version 6.0 standards? So I always like to cover this when we're talking about it because it's a question that typically was asked when I was a clinical accreditation reviewer. So in that case, your organization would need to be compliant with what we're talking about today, version 6 of the standards, on the date that you submit your application for reaccreditation under that version. So what the clinical accreditation reviewer would look at prior to that date would be compliance with the prior versions that you were accredited under through the accreditation cycle until that application for reaccreditation is submitted. So I always like to point that out because it is a question.